Hello, so I'm just gonna make a quick revision video trying to explain the ontological argument by Anselm just from the top of my head with like no notes around me. I've got Freud over there and I've got a work plan over here, so yeah. Anselm, he believed that God was that than which no greater can be thought, and his argument was the ontological argument. This is a priori argument, so it means it's based on logic and it's an inductive argument. So yeah, it's based on logic. That's basically all that means. Um, so what Anselm said was God is that than which no greater can be thought, which means that God is the greatest possible being you can think of. Um, and what he also believed was that what exists, if you can think of the greatest possible being, then that being must also exist in reality, or it's not the greatest possible being, because something that exists in reality is more great than the thing that just exists in the mind. So that was his reasoning for why God exists, and it does seem to make sense. Sort of. Yeah, but obviously it can be criticised. Galileo criticised it with an island. With the idea of an island, basically you can think up the perfect island and you can imagine it, but that doesn't make it real. Just because you can imagine the most perfect island, it doesn't automatically mean that it must also exist in reality, because that's like saying you can think up anything and it automatically makes it exist in reality. But then Anselm comes back with his second form of the argument and he's like, well, God's not like an island. God's necessary. He's not a tangible thing. He's not something you can hold. He's beyond all of that. He's beyond what you can even like imagine. So you can't. So he pretty much really crushed Galileo's argument, and he did a lot more damage to Galileo's criticism of him than Galileo did to Anselm's actual argument. So yeah, but yeah, Anselm's argument still isn't perfect because Kant, who came around in the 17th century, maybe 18th century, and he basically said existence is not a predicate, and this basically means that existence isn't a quality of something. Like something either exists or it doesn't. Something can't exist more than anything else. It's not like a scale. So the fact that Anselm says Anselm says God exists is an analytical statement, which means you can tell it's true just by looking at the statement. And that's debatable, because you can say that a necessary being exists, a necessary God exists, which is what Anselm does in the second form of the argument. But the first form of the argument, he just says God exists. This is an analytical statement. It must be true. Like all bachelors are unmarried men. That tells you something about the statement in itself. You know that's true because a bachelor is an unmarried man, and so all bachelors are unmarried men. It would be paradoxical to say that bachelors can't be unmarried men or whatever. I don't know if paradox is the right word there. Yeah, so there's that. But yeah, Kant says existence is not predicate. And then another guy comes along. I can't remember his name, but he does a car analogy, and it's basically like if you've got a new car, someone can come along. They can take the stereo out of your car. They can take the wheels off your car, but the car's still there. But if someone comes along and removes the existence of the car, that there is no car. It doesn't take anything away from the car. It just takes away the whole car. The car's no longer there. So he was supporting the idea that existence isn't a predicate. It's not a quality. It doesn't tell us anything about something. So I can go into that idea a little bit deeper. I can say that I'm a person. I've got glasses on. I've got blue hair. I've got a white vest up on. All these things say something about me. Say something about my appearance right now. But to say that I exist, it doesn't add anything to me. It just says that I exist in reality. And yeah, so no one's really been able to criticise I'll go against Kant's argument, because due to his logic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't really know where else to go with this. I guess I can just try and wrap it up a little bit. So it is Anselm's argument effective in making people believe in God? Debatably, because it hasn't really done a very good job at persuading people to believe in God. Rather, it's managed to get people who already believe to be able to justify their belief a little bit further, I guess. And yeah, so it's really not that good. It's like a circular argument. It works within itself. It's logical within itself due to the mathematics of it, but it doesn't necessarily. Not all the evidence points to the belief in God. It's like he says is a necessary being. He says God is necessary, and that's a attribute that humans have assigned to God. So we don't necessarily know even if God is necessary. It's just the way that religious people see God. So an atheist coming along hears this argument, they're going to be like, well, there is no God. God isn't necessary. There is no God at all. So because that's quite an important part of the argument to understand that God is a necessary being, it's not going to make an atheist come along and believe in God. It's just going to strengthen the beliefs of someone who already believes. So for that reason, perhaps it's not such a strong argument. But the second form of the argument with the necessary being, it's really hard to actually overcome logically, because to say that a necessary being doesn't exist is a contradiction in itself. Because to be necessary means it has to exist. It can't not exist. So if I was to say that a necessary being doesn't exist, it doesn't make sense logically. But then again, we can argue that what Anselm's doing is using semantics. He's just playing word games. He's using logic and different words in different orders in order to make his logic coherent within itself, but it doesn't necessarily actually tell us anything about reality and what's actually happening, and whether there actually is a God in the sky. Well, in the sky, that's a really not a right way of putting it. But it doesn't actually tell us whether there is a God. This has got cut out in a minute, so